Coming up next, the Starfleet Airtram. Well, hey guys, and welcome back to another Interstellar Modeler. Ready to get started here with my second of two builds from Cozmic Scale Models. The first of which, of course, was the land ram from Battlestar Galactica. And by the way, I do want to take a moment to thank you guys for all the kind comments you left in the comment section of that video. I really do appreciate it. It was a fun project to work on. I was really pleased with the way it turned out. But ready to get started now with this one. This is the 172 scale model of the Airtram from Starfleet Headquarters. This, of course, is the shuttle that you see Admiral Kirk come in on at the beginning of Star Trek The Motion Picture as he is headed to Starfleet Command. There are a number of different kits you can get there at Cozmic Scale Models, and I chose this one in particular because I've always liked the design of the shuttle, and it's a unique kit. It's not something that you see every day, and I thought it'd make a great addition to my Star Trek collection. Well, before I get started with the build, let me take a moment to show you again what comes inside the box and what's included. I know I did that a couple of videos ago, but I thought it would be good to refresh your memory. Let's go ahead and take a look. Now, before I begin with showing the parts, let me just show you a couple of screenshots I took from the movie. You can see it's a beautifully done set piece. This particular shot shows the green and yellow lights that are on the exterior of the shuttle, as well as a rotating yellow light that's kind of like a siren on top. So this is the upper and lower half of the shuttle. You can see the interior where the seats are going to mount. We've got the seats right here. Some nice detailing on those. And we've got a couple of pilot figures there. And these are the doors and the step. And this is the divider between the cockpit and the rear cabin. And then we've got some translucent parts here to help illuminate those lights. And these are the pinstripes that it comes with as well, and a little decal sheet here. Now, as for the colors, the exterior of the shuttle is white, so I'm going to go with a semi-gloss white. And as for the interior, it's going to be a combination of white, and I think I'm going to use beige or a tan for the seats. That was a common color back in the late 70s for furniture. And as for the interior of where the doors open, this is another screenshot here. It looks to be a light gray. That might simply be the cool white lighting that they use for this shot, but I am going to go for a light gray for the interior walls. As for the windows, you have two options. It comes first with this one, and then you've got this one here, which are tinted in kind of like a clear smoke color. And the way that you mount these in, you're supposed to cut these out and mount them in from the bottom. But I think what I'm going to do is go with this first, because this already has the sharp corners. It's already molded to the shape of the shuttle, and it's just a matter of spray painting this with Tamiya's clear smoke. Now let me take a moment to review my plans for lighting. First of all, I'm going to be using pico-size SMDs from Evandesigns.com, and I'm still at the moment waiting for a few others to get in, but the first two lights I'll be adding are the lights at the forward section of the shuttle. As I showed you there's a green one on that one side. I'm going to assume that's a running light, so on the opposite side I'm going to mount a red one. There are the yellow lights at the tail end. I'm going to mount one yellow light on each side. And then to replicate the look of that blinking light or that siren type fixture at the top of the shuttle, I'll be using a pico-sized SMD yellow light with a blinking effect. A couple other places I might add lights will be that little corridor, because the door is going to be mounted open. You'll be able to see inside there. And whether I put one over the rear cabin, I'm not sure. I'm going to test that out. Since I'm adding some detailing there with those seats, I thought it'd be cool to be able to see that. But I'll test it to see if that even looks appropriate. As for a display base, I do have one planned. I'm not going to tell you too many details about that at the moment because I'm still working out a few things, but hopefully it will all work out because I think it's gonna look cool. But I'll fill you in on that in just a little bit. Let's go ahead and get started with the build. Well, I did put a coat of Stynylres's white primer over this in preparation for applying the base color, and I went ahead and tinted the windshields now with Tamiya's clear smoke. So next step will be to cut these out. Now you notice that the smaller parts do come still attached to the supports, and they are thin enough to where you could just, you know, snap them free. But it's best to just take your clippers and snip them off just to make sure that you don't damage anything. Now there's not much sanding that you need to do with this model. I did have to do a little cleanup on the upper section here. There were a few lines that you could see, but it didn't take much to clear that off. The doors also have these lines as well, these striations, and I'm in the process of sanding those off as well. And next it was time to drill the holes for the lights, and this was done by just using my Dremel and a small drill bit. Okay, just to get you caught up here now, I've applied the base color, which was Vallejo's white. And by the way, I no longer mess with gloss paints. They're difficult and messy to work with, take a long time to dry. So this way you apply your acrylic paint, it dries very quickly, and then over this I applied an enamel gloss coat. Now I have the seats ready to be painted here, and I decided just to leave them on their supports and put them on this paint stick here. Now, as mentioned earlier, I was planning on painting them tan, but I decided to take another look at some of the reference pictures, and this close-up of the cockpit shows that the pilot seat appears to be gray or gray-blue, and that makes sense since we saw a lot of grays and blues in the film. Okay, well here we now have the completed chairs, and after painting them with a mix of Vallejo's gray blue and Field blue, I applied a gloss coat, then brushed on a dark gray wash to bring out some of the details. I know you probably won't see much of this, but I still wanted to try to make them look more realistic regardless. So I decided to add a little color on the inside, and what I'm doing here now is applying Vallejo's basil gray to the floor. If you look at this picture of Shatner standing at the entryway, you can see the floor is a dark gray. And just a lighter gray here for the steps that lead out of the shuttle. And then underneath the seats, I am painting this Vallejo's sky gray. And next step is to drill out the holes where the wires will exit. We've got 2 on the back. And we have 2 holes in the front section to allow wires to exit there. And these are going to be hidden inside the compartment that separates the cockpit from the middle section. Well, the first light I attached was the siren, and so it's glued into here now. And then I used my rotary tool, as you can see here, to create a little notch here for the wire. And this is going to fit right into place here. And the wire is going to feed into this little compartment where it will then feed out of the shuttle. Now, I do need to light block this, so what I'm going to do is use some epoxy putty here and just apply it onto the light here. Well, I thought I would do a quick light test here just to kind of see how effective this is at light blocking, and I'm just going to have to paint that black and then paint it over with some white in the morning, so I'm going to give that time to dry. And turning it over just to show you what the effect looks from the opposite side, you can see it's going to provide a nice effect for our blinking warning siren. Well, it is next morning now. What I did first was to paint the area black, but that wasn't enough, so I ended up using tulip paint. And the room has to be pretty dark to see that there's a slight bit of yellow still coming through the very edges of the square that I've painted there, so that's going to work out great. So I decided to go ahead and put the little light that's going to shine down into this little corridor here, and for that I used a pico-sized cool white SMD and created a little light diffuser using some clear styrene. You can see I'm just using my tweezers to bend it and shape it. And it was glued on here with super glue, and I'm now using epoxy scalp putty to fill in the sides. I glued in a very thin styrene rod at the front. This is the side that's going to be facing out. The back side is not so critical because that door is going to be closed and we're not going to be looking into that side of the shuttle. Moving on now to the lights that are on the sides, starting with the 2 front ones. And this is just the method that I use to glue these in place. They easily move around a lot, so one way to secure things is to first start off with masking tape to hold them in place before placing the super glue and an accelerator. And here I'm using my airbrush to help dry things a little quicker. And the same technique was used for the lights that need to be mounted in the aft section. So before final assembly, I chose to add in some windows for the side doors. This was just done by cutting out some clear styrene I happen to have on hand. And I also took some clear styrene, tinted it with Tamiya's clear smoke, and added these dark panels onto the side wall. I noticed in the reference pictures that these panels were not open. They were covered with some sort of dark paneling, which I imagine were to simulate some sort of control panels. So I started the final assembly of the shuttle by first adding in the seats. The wall had to be put into place, and the wires had to be threaded through. Well, the two halves are assembled now, and this took quite a bit of maneuvering to get done. Most of this difficulty that I encountered was my fault. If you recall, I ended up adding in some epoxy sculpt putty here and here for these lights. If you're going to put lights in, don't bother with doing that, because that epoxy putty interfered with the way that wall behind the pilots went in there. Now, I did test fit this, but unfortunately it didn't work out when I was putting the two halves together. I actually had to completely disassemble everything, take out the wires, take out that wall, and trim it down until the two halves went together. Even though they did go together, there was a gap along this side in particular, but then I remembered that there had to be some striping. In fact, the model comes with some thin pinstriping. However, it was too thin for my purposes here, so I had to go to an auto parts store, and I purchased this stuff here for $3.99. It's a pinstriping that comes with two sizes, and I just used my X-Acto knife to cut out the thinner one, and it worked perfectly. You can see this is how it went on. It was fairly straightforward to install using some Q-tips as I went along, and it did a good job with covering the imperfections here on this other side. So the wires are all set, everything is together now. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like when it's illuminated. Alright, so here we have a light test. I'm very pleased with how things are looking here. I did want to point out, if you notice now, the green and red running lights there are a little more subdued, and the reason for that is because I chose to tint some cool white SMDs versus using pre-colored SMDs. I noticed in the screenshot that the green light was a bit subdued, as well as the yellow, and so rather than having a bright green light, I decided to go that route, and I think it worked out well. And I'm very happy with how the corridor turned out. That little SMD that I put there is illuminating it perfectly. Well, a few more details to add to the shuttle, including the decals, but I'm not going to record that. I'm ready to move on to the display, and I'm excited to share with you what I have planned. What I'd like to do is recreate the scene when the shuttle is landed and Admiral Kirk has just stepped off the shuttle and Commander Sonak is meeting him there. So in order to recreate this, it required making the track, and I approached my friend Mark Fraley a couple of weeks ago to see if he'd be willing to design the track, and he took on the project and he came up with a file that I was able to 3D print the track from, and he did a fantastic job. So I want to mention a big thanks to Mark, because none of this would have been possible without his help. If you recall, he helped me with my Battlestar Galactica launch tube, designing the files for that, and so he's become quite skilled at this. So let's go ahead and take a look. First, let me show you a screenshot of the track itself. This is in the Slicer program. This is what we use to attach the supports prior to 3D printing. And so what he did was he used reference photos to come up with this, and he's very meticulous and very observant, really did a good job with replicating the look of the track. And so it took a couple of printings, but this is what it looks like here with the shuttle sitting on top of it. Obviously nothing is attached here. This is just to show you the scale and everything. So what I have to do with this track now is we have to light it up, and as you see in this reference picture, the track is lit all along the sides. And at first I was going to be using the Mega SMD strand from Evandesigns, but I was watching my friend Ken Spriggs, who's been working on a diorama of the Fly, and he's been using this flexible SMD filament. And so this is available from Brickstuff. I'll put the link down below, but it will provide a nice even illumination across the entire filament, and that's exactly what I need for this track. So this is fairly easy to work with. You have to hook it up to a 3-volt power source. One end connects to the negative lead while the other is to the positive there. Along the sides of the track, I also plan on mounting some styrene plastic, some clear styrene that will be frosted over, again, just to replicate the look that you see there on screen.
And of course need to paint that and attach it to a base. So I think I'm going to go ahead and use Foamular because I can cut it to whatever length I need. The track will be mounted on some white styrene, and then I'll use some other styrene to create the flooring around it. I've also went ahead and printed some figures. You can see here, these came from cgtrader.com. I'll post the link below to these. This file came with lots and lots of figures, so I just chose what I thought would work and printed them to scale. And I still have to paint them, of course. So I'm excited to get started with this part of it, and so far everything's going really well. Let's go ahead and dive into the display.
Well, you can see I have the track painted now, and the sides were colored with a mixture of khaki brown and Vallejo's tan yellow. And then I used gunmetal for the crossbars, and then a semi-gloss black for the styrene that it's going to be mounted to. Now you'll notice that I have the track now mounted so that it's a little lower than this side. If you look at these reference pictures, you'll notice that the flooring actually goes up to the side of the track. So it has to go to about right here. And so what I did was I lowered it down about 7 millimeters, and that allows me then to mount the flooring right next to the track, just like that. Now if you lay the shuttle down, and remember as the door opens it's a gull wing configuration, right? So the upper part opens up and the bottom part becomes a step. That step should be level with the flooring. Now if it's just resting like this, that's not going to happen. So the only way to do that is to lift the shuttle, which I'm going to do. I'm going to mount it on about a 10 millimeter styrene post there. And once you do that, then the step becomes level with the flooring, just as you see in the reference picture there. And it's interesting because Mark Fraley and I were talking about how this shuttle probably floats above the track, kind of like a maglev train. It would come in and not really rest on the track there. There's no wheels or anything for it to move on. So it would make sense that it would actually levitate a bit. So by lifting the shuttle this way, it will then appear as if it is floating above the track, like it probably should. The other thing this solves a problem with is light blocking, because I am going to have that strip of that filament that's going to light up the sides of the track there. And I was trying to think of a way to block these slits, but that's going to be easily done now since they're going to be covered. For the opposite side, I'll have to cut a piece of styrene that will cover that side as well. So I'm now adding the white styrene for the track. This is just the thinnest styrene that I have here. It's almost like a thick sheet of paper, and it is cut at 9 millimeters in width. And I'm also adding these styrene strips that I've made and coated with tulip paint. All this is to help with light blocking. In the past I've gotten caught with not doing enough light blocking. I'm just trying to anticipate where light just might peek through, so I think I've got my bases covered here.
And just a quick word here about these flexible filaments from Brickstuff. Let me show you a light test. You'll notice as I turn on the light, it is a warm white color. I was actually hoping it was going to be a cool white, but this is an oversight on my part, expecting that. If I had looked close enough at the shopping cart, I would have noticed that there is a warm white designation there. They do not make a cool white filament. So I might have been hesitant a little bit, but I still would have gone forward with it. This provides a nice even illumination, so that's one advantage. The other is that it's powered by simply a AA battery, and it can last a long time on batteries. And I did try, by the way, strip LEDs as an alternative, but they do result in a bunch of hot spots because, and it's understandable because these lights are right up against the openings there, and no doubt the same thing would have happened had I used a string of SMDs as I originally had intended. And hooking these up to wires is very easy. This is a quick video here of me putting just a drop of solder there, and that's all you need. Once you get that done, you are good to go. So I have to say, even though this might not be exactly the color I was looking for, that's okay. I did test this out, and it's still going to look great.
Okay, well I have the track now glued on to the base here. There's a little piece of styrene there that I had to put in place just to align this. It was popping up a little bit. This is going to be concealed under the flooring. Okay, on the bottom side now we have channels I've created for the wires. They're coming through already, and have holes now for the wires that are going to come from the shuttle. So the other thing I've done now is I've mounted 3 posts, styrene posts now, or blocks, to the shuttle. This will allow the shuttle to sit about 9 millimeters above the track there, so it'll appear like it is hovering above the track, and again this will allow that step to line up with the floor. Well, the shuttle now is glued into place, so still have to put the decals there, but everything is wired in now. And let me just do a quick light test here. You can see everything turns on. I'll turn off the lights here real quick. So very pleased with how this has all turned out. Now what I have to move on with now are the floors, and so I've got some styrene plastic cut to fit from the edge of the display to the edge of the track there. And I used my scribing tool just to create some panel lines here. So this is a picture of the floor, and you can see it's kind of an off-white color with some darker colors splattered on. So I'll apply the base color. This is already primed and ready to go. And I think the best way to approach this is just to splatter on some darker colors with a toothbrush. Well, this is how our floor turned out, and this all started with just painting it with a off-white color, basically an ivory color, and just took a toothbrush, basically splattering paint, various colors from hull red, burnt umber, brass, and gold, just all kinds of different colors. And to darken the panel line, I just used Tamiya's panel line accent color of brown, and it worked out great. So I sprayed over a gloss coat, and you can see it's going to work out pretty well.
So getting to the final stretch here now, and it's time to talk about the back wall, which I originally intended on fabricating from sheet styrene, but Mark Fraley came through again and he created this STL file for a back wall. So here they are printed up, and I was able to do this yesterday. They are looking great. I'm very happy with them. I'm going to go ahead and prime and paint them and show you what they look like when they're done. Okay, well here is the completed wall now. I used the same color tones as that of the track, and they've been super glued onto a 2mm piece of styrene plastic. Now you notice I have magnets here. The idea there is to be able to detach this easily from the base. That way when I want to pack it away to take it to a show, it's easily done. If you're wondering how I got the magnets to align, the method I use is to glue on the magnets to one side, and then I put on the adjoining magnets that's going to go on the opposite side. I apply a little paint on those magnets, then press it up against the base, and that leaves a marking, as you see here, to tell you where to attach the magnets. Well, just a few final steps here, including adding the decals and painting the figures. I'm in the process of doing that. I'm not going to record any of that because it's, well, not too exciting. So I'll get through those steps then, and I will show you the completed project in just a second. So here we have the completed diorama featuring the 172 scale Starfleet Airtram from Cozmic Scale Models. The Airtram is a 3D printed kit that comes with a good amount of detail, including interior parts for the passenger cabin and the cockpit, along with 2 pilot figures. Assembly is pretty straightforward, and when completed, it appears to be a pretty accurate representation of the Airtram. One prominent feature of the design are the large tinted windows, and the model comes with 2 options. I chose to use the molded ones, which were easy to paint, trim, and glue into place. They were then tinted with Tamiya's smoke, which worked well to duplicate the look of the windows seen on screen. Painting of the ship is very simple, as the shuttle has a plain white exterior, and I used Vallejo's flat white for the job. This was followed by an application of gloss coat, since the shuttle appears to have a gloss finish in the film. The shuttle sports a red stripe that follows along the entire midsection of the ship, and the kit comes with red pinstriping. But I chose to purchase pinstripes from an auto parts store instead, since I wanted to have something a little thicker and bolder. Now this is a small kit, but SMDs are perfect for such tight spaces, so I used nano-size SMDs for running lights and decided to tint them instead of using pre-colored SMDs. I chose to do this to make the light colors more subtle, just as they appeared in the film. For the siren on top, however, I did choose to use a pre-colored yellow nano SMD, and the light was sold with a blinking effect. All of these SMDs were from Evandesigns.com. As for the display base, the completed diorama was made possible with the help of Mark Fraley, who designed STL files that allow me to print the parts I needed. I was going to attempt to scratch build a lot of this, but I'm so happy Mark was willing to lend a hand here. Not only did it make it easier, but his eye for details made for a more accurate looking display base, and I'm just so pleased with the end results. Using filament lighting from Brickstuff was easy, and it really helped to replicate the type of continuous lighting seen in the film. Although I envisioned the lights being cool white, the warm white filament strands still did a fantastic job here. I definitely look forward to using those flexible strands in future projects. The strands are very reasonable in cost and are shipped in a very timely fashion. I've provided a link to Brickstuff in the video's description. The final touch was adding in all of the people. These were printed from a file I found on CG Trader, which contained up to 200 low poly figures. Low poly means that they don't have extreme details, but they were perfect for this scale. Although they weren't sci-fi figures in particular, they were easily painted with the proper uniform colors to stand in for the Starfleet personnel. Here we see Admiral Kirk and Commander Sonak heading off to see Admiral Nagura, while some Starfleet personnel are seen conversing in the background. Now I had a little fun here and added in a few extra touches, including an Endorian. I made the antenna using small pieces of wire, which I then superglued onto his head. Now one of the figures was outfitted with clothes that reminded me very much of the uniforms seen on Star Trek Enterprise, so I couldn't resist painting him to look like Captain Archer. And note how the Endorian is faced towards him as he looks on with much surprise seeing the famous captain walk by. And lastly, I've painted this figure in my likeness, making myself look out of place like I've been transported to the future and standing around desperately trying to use my cell phone to try to figure out what has just happened. All in all, this was a very fun project to work on. Well, it's been a long road getting here, but we got here nonetheless. Well, I'm ready to wrap this project up here now, and just a couple comments here before I leave. So first of all, if you are going to use Foamular for these display bases, I think it's a great material to work with. What has helped out a lot for me was to get a wire cutter, a tabletop wire cutter. You can see here it makes it very easy to cut the Foamular with straight edges. That's really important because in order for them to fit properly, they just have to be straight. I've tried using box cutters, but they always come out crooked no matter how careful you are. So I invested a little bit in getting a wire cutter. This one didn't cost me a whole lot. I'll definitely put a link down below to the one I got. And just a word of caution, if you are going to be working with Foamular, just make sure that you work in a well-ventilated area if you are cutting that stuff. Sometimes the residue will stay on the wire cutter and it will emit some smoke. You do not want to breathe that in, so make sure you're wearing a mask. I also have a fan that blows stuff away from me. I have a big floor fan that's constantly blowing, and since I'm fortunate enough to work in a garage, I have that garage door open, so it's very well ventilated here. So just some precautions there if you choose to work with material. And one other thing I forgot to mention was how I ended up gluing the door propped open. That was done by attaching a toothpick temporarily and spaced it just enough to squeeze the door into place there, and just put some super glue in place and left it there, and it worked out good. Okay, well, if you have any questions about this build, feel free to leave a message here on my YouTube channel or contact me at interstellarmodeler@gmail.com. This was a lot of fun, the last two projects working on the land ram and this one. So just a little celebration here of Cosmic Scale Models. I'd highly recommend you checking out their website and getting hold of some of their models. They are great quality, a lot of fun to work with, and they are unique pieces to add to your collection. A big thanks to Keith and Adele at Cosmic Scale Models for giving me the opportunity to show you these models here and adding them to my collection. Oh, by the way, before I go, one other quick word here about the model build. Mark's files, I want to make mention there that I was asking him whether or not he's going to have these available. I do believe he will do that eventually. I'm just not sure when. He was talking about making some changes, and he felt the best way to do that is to actually have a shuttle in hand himself. So I believe that's what he's going to end up doing. So just stay tuned with that. If he lets me know, I will definitely pass the word along. You can also follow me on my Facebook page at Interstellar Modeler on Facebook, or Augie Gonzalez, and I certainly will get the word out once those are available. Okay, well, that is going to do it here for now, and I think the next thing for the channel now is going to be Wonderfest. I don't think I'll be posting anything else prior to the show. I'm trying to work on a couple of painting projects, one of which is this statue, or this bust, I should say, from Blackheart Models of Moff Gideon. And I already started on that one. And I do plan on this other one. It's a figure of the $6 Million Man. This is something I printed a while ago. I just haven't gotten around to it, so I'm really hoping to get to it prior to the show. So we'll see if I make it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.